Picture a clear night sky, calm winds sweeping across the runways of Kuala Lumpur International Airport, the hum of engines echoing in the distance. Inside a gleaming Boeing 777, 239 souls prepared for a journey they believed was ordinary, routine, and safe. Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 lifted from the ground bound for Beijing, its takeoff unremarkable, its mission simple. But within hours, the unimaginable occurred. The aircraft that embodied modern engineering and decades of progress seemed to dissolve into the shadows of the sky. No wreckage, no distress calls, no signs of life. It was as if the plane had been swallowed whole by the night itself. What makes this disappearance so chilling is not only the sheer size of the machine that vanished, but the silence that followed it. Flight crews are trained to respond to emergencies, to send mayday signals, to fight for survival in the most desperate moments. Yet MH370 offered nothing. Its final words to air traffic control were calm, almost casual. "Good night, Malaysian 370. And after that, silence. No panic, no alarm, only a void that technology and satellites have failed to fill. Families waited for answers that never came. Search teams combed through endless stretches of ocean, deploying vessels, aircraft, and satellites. But the deeper they searched, the less certain the story became. Each lead dissolved into contradiction. Each theory gave birth to more questions. Was it a catastrophic mechanical failure? A deliberate act of sabotage? A hijacking that went far beyond our understanding? No explanation fits completely. The ocean guarded its secret, and humanity was left staring into the abyss of unanswered questions. MH370 is not just a missing flight. It is a haunting reminder that even in an age of constant surveillance and global connectivity, there are still places where truth can vanish. If a massive commercial jet, filled with passengers and tracked by advanced radar systems, can disappear without a trace, what else might remain hidden beyond the horizon? What else could be lost without reason, without warning, into the silence of the skies? The evening of March 8th began like any other for the passengers of MH370. Families, business travelers, students, and crew members boarded the aircraft with no reason to suspect that history was about to change. The boarding gates closed, the engines roared, and at exactly 12:41 in the morning local time, the Boeing 777 lifted off the runway. It was scheduled to land in Beijing at 6:30 in the morning. For the first 30 minutes, everything appeared routine. Communications between the cockpit and air traffic controllers were normal. Systems operated smoothly, and the aircraft ascended into the dark skies without issue. At 1:19 in the morning, the last known words from the cockpit were transmitted. "Good night, Malaysian 370. The phrase carried no sign of stress, no coded message, no hint of trouble. But 2 minutes later, something happened that has baffled investigators ever since. The aircraft's transponder, the device that communicates position and altitude to radar, was suddenly switched off. In an instant, the plane vanished from civilian radar screens, as though it had ceased to exist. Yet the journey was not over. Military radar later revealed that the jet had not crashed, but had instead deviated from its course. It turned sharply west, crossing the Malay Peninsula, and continued flying for hours into the night. What was happening on board remains one of the most unsettling mysteries of modern aviation. If there was a crisis, why no distress signal? If it was a hijacking, how did the hijackers maintain such silence and control for so long? Some experts believe the maneuver required advanced knowledge of flight systems, suggesting either a highly skilled pilot or someone inside the cockpit itself. Others argue it may have been a slow, unfolding technical failure that disabled communication systems while leaving the plane flying on autopilot. By the time international search teams realized the scope of the problem, MH370 had already disappeared beyond conventional tracking. Somewhere over the vast stretches of ocean, the aircraft continued for nearly 7 hours before its fuel reserves were believed to have run dry. But where it finally went down remains uncertain, hidden in one of the most remote and unforgiving parts of the planet. When MH370 vanished, the world reacted with disbelief, and soon disbelief turned into an international operation unlike anything ever attempted before. More than 24 countries joined the effort, sending ships, planes, satellites, and submarines across vast oceans. Families of passengers clung to the hope that debris or survivors would be found. But day after day, the search zones expanded, then shifted, then expanded again. Each time officials believed they had narrowed the area, new data overturned the conclusion. The first phase of the search focused on the South China Sea, where the flight was initially expected to travel. But nothing was found there. Then investigators revealed shocking new details. Military radar showed the plane had changed direction entirely, flying west across the Malay Peninsula and heading into the Andaman Sea. This revelation widened the search dramatically. Suddenly, instead of a small patch of water, the investigation covered an area larger than entire nations. Weeks turned into months as the focus shifted southward into the desolate Indian Ocean. Satellite data suggested the aircraft continued flying for hours after its last known position, eventually descending into a part of the ocean rarely visited by ships and nearly impossible to scan in full. Ocean currents, vast depths, and shifting weather conditions made the search brutal. Despite the largest and most expensive investigation in aviation history, covering hundreds of thousands of square miles, the results were almost non-existent. The few fragments that eventually surfaced on distant shorelines only deepened the mystery. A wing flaperon discovered on Réunion Island in the Indian Ocean in July 2015 confirmed the plane had indeed ended in the sea. But this discovery raised more questions than answers. How could such small fragments appear thousands of miles from the suspected crash site? Why did sonar scans of the seafloor in the priority search zone reveal no wreckage at all? The search became more than a rescue mission. It became a quest to solve a puzzle that defied logic. Governments, scientists, and private companies poured resources into the ocean, yet the silence remained unbroken. For families waiting on answers, the ocean became not only a grave, but a wall, an endless frontier that refused to give back its secrets. As weeks passed without clear answers, the mystery of MH370 began to attract theories ranging from the logical to the unthinkable. Investigators first considered the possibility of a catastrophic mechanical failure. Could a fire, sudden decompression, or electrical malfunction have knocked out systems and silenced the crew? Yet critics quickly pointed out that even in such scenarios, some form of emergency signal is usually transmitted. The absence of any distress call made this theory difficult to accept fully. Attention then shifted toward the crew. The pilot, Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, became a central figure in speculation. Experienced, skilled, and respected. Yet investigators combed through his flight simulator records, personal life, and background. They discovered routes plotted on his home computer that mirrored the possible path of MH370 into the southern Indian Ocean. Some argued this was coincidence. Others believed it suggested a premeditated act. Still, no definitive evidence linked him directly to sabotage, and those close to him insisted he was incapable of such intent. Another possibility raised was hijacking. Could armed individuals have seized control of the plane, silenced communication systems, and redirected it? The challenge lies in the silence that followed. A hijacking typically involves demands, threats, or some form of communication to leverage hostages. But here, no group ever claimed responsibility, no ransom was demanded, and no political motive emerged. The idea of a silent hijacking seems both haunting and implausible. Then there were darker whispers. Government involvement, secret military operations, even suggestions that the plane was intercepted or concealed. Some pointed to Diego Garcia, a remote U.S. military base in the Indian Ocean, as a possible destination, though no evidence has ever supported this theory. Conspiracy theories thrive in the absence of facts, and MH370 provided fertile ground for endless speculation. What makes the case so chilling is that every theory holds fragments of possibility, yet none fit perfectly. A mechanical failure cannot explain the deliberate course changes. A hijacking cannot explain the silence. A pilot's suicide cannot explain why no conclusive evidence was left behind. Each explanation collapses under its own contradictions, leaving behind only shadows and unanswered questions. For over a year after MH370 vanished, the search brought nothing but silence. Families lived in limbo, caught between hope and despair. Then, in July 2015, a breakthrough appeared, or so it seemed. On the shores of Réunion Island, a remote speck of land in the Indian Ocean, beachcombers stumbled upon a large wing fragment known as a Flaperon. Tests confirmed it belonged to MH370, marking the first physical trace of the missing aircraft. For many, this discovery was the long-awaited confirmation that the plane had indeed ended in the ocean. Yet with confirmation came more unsettling questions. The location of the Flaperon puzzled investigators. Ocean drift studies suggested debris from the suspected crash zone could reach Réunion, but the distance was staggering. How could such a massive aircraft leave behind so little? And why had nothing else surfaced earlier? Soon after, more fragments were discovered along distant coastlines. In Madagascar, Mozambique, Mauritius, and Tanzania, each piece was painstakingly examined. Some confirmed as belonging to MH370, others disputed. These fragments provided haunting proof of destruction, but they revealed little about what had actually caused the disappearance. Some debris pieces showed signs of damage that sparked debate among experts. Was the breakage consistent with a high-speed impact into the sea, or did it suggest a more controlled descent? If the plane had slammed violently into the ocean, larger debris fields would likely have been scattered across the surface. Yet, if it had glided down under some level of control, why was there still no signal, no trace, no survivors? Every interpretation of the fragments produced contradictions. For the families, the debris discoveries were a double-edged sword. On one hand, they confirmed what many feared, that MH370 had not landed safely on some hidden runway, that it had ended in tragedy. On the other hand, the pieces were too few, too scattered, and too ambiguous to provide real closure. Instead, they became symbols of absence, fragile reminders that the answers remained locked away in the deep. The ocean had given back fragments, but not truth. Instead of solving the puzzle, the discoveries intensified it, ensuring that MH370 would remain not only an unsolved mystery, but a story that haunted the very families who longed most for certainty. By the time the fragments surfaced, the world was consumed not by answers, but by doubt. The official investigation struggled, shifting search zones again and again. Yet the wreckage remained elusive. Billions of dollars were spent, thousands of hours poured into the ocean, and still MH370 held onto its silence. For the families, the fragments were not proof of truth, but proof of absence. They had scraps of metal, but not a story. And this is where the case takes on a haunting life of its own. Think about it. How does a modern aircraft, built with multiple layers of communication systems, vanish completely in an era of satellites, radar, and global tracking? This was not the early days of aviation. This was 2014, a world where smartphones could trace our movements, yet a plane the size of a building could vanish without leaving a digital footprint. That silence is more terrifying than any wreckage. The unanswered questions multiply. Was someone on board deliberately trying to disappear? Was the plane flown into one of the most remote corners of the planet on purpose? Or was it all a cascade of failures, so perfectly aligned that it erased every chance of survival? The truth should have surfaced by now, and the fact that it hasn't only makes the mystery darker. And here is where I want to pull you, the viewer, directly into the heart of this mystery. Imagine for a moment, you are on that flight. The lights dimmed, The cabin quiet, the engines steady, and suddenly everything slips into silence. No warning, no explanation. If this could happen to them, could it happen again? Could it happen to you? Tell me in the comments. If you were forced to choose, what theory makes the most sense to you? Do you believe it was a hijacking, a deliberate act by the pilot, or an unthinkable accident that erased the aircraft from history? Your thoughts may not solve the case, but they might reveal how we, as humans, cling to explanations when faced with the abyss of the unknown. For the families of those on board, the disappearance of MH370 was not only a tragedy, but a cruel kind of limbo. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and still the authorities had no clear explanation. Relatives clung to televisions, waiting for announcements that often ended in confusion or contradiction. Each new lead sparked brief hope, followed by crushing disappointment. With no wreckage, no bodies, and no answers, grief could not settle into acceptance. Instead, it remained suspended, an endless ache with no resolution. Psychologists describe this torment as ambiguous loss, a state where loved ones are neither confirmed alive nor truly mourned as dead. Families of MH370 passengers lived in this unbearable space, caught between faint hope and overwhelming despair. Some demanded further searches, refusing to let go until the plane was found. Others turned their pain into protests, holding vigils, speaking to the media, and demanding accountability from the airline and governments. Every unanswered question became a wound, reopened each time officials shifted the story. For investigators, the psychological weight was also profound. Aviation is built on certainty, on systems designed to prevent disasters from becoming mysteries. Yet here was a case that defied their tools and training. Experts who dedicated their lives to solving crashes admitted they could not explain this one. Each failed search eroded confidence, not only in aviation safety, but in human ability to uncover truth. And then there was the wider world. Millions of strangers who had no direct link to the passengers, but who followed the case obsessively. MH370 tapped into something deeper than tragedy. It became a symbol of vulnerability, proof that control is never absolute. In an age of satellites, smartphones, and 24-hour connectivity, the idea that something so large could simply disappear felt almost supernatural. It was a reminder that mystery still stalks the skies, and that perhaps our faith in technology is more fragile than we believe. The human cost of MH370 stretches beyond the numbers lost. It lingers in the unresolved grief of families, in the restless minds of investigators, and in the global fascination that refuses to fade. This is not just a missing aircraft. It is a wound carved into the human story, still waiting for answers that may never arrive. In the aftermath of MH370, the aviation industry was forced to confront an unsettling truth. If such a massive aircraft could vanish without trace, then the systems designed to track and protect passengers were not as strong as believed. For decades, commercial aviation had relied on radar, transponders, and radio contact as its backbone. Yet this case revealed how quickly those systems could be silenced, leaving both families and authorities blind to the fate of hundreds of lives. The disappearance triggered urgent calls for change. International organizations debated new standards for global flight tracking, insisting that airlines must provide near real-time location updates. Technologies such as satellite-based automatic dependent surveillance were suddenly prioritized, promising to reduce the chance of another aircraft slipping beyond the reach of controllers. Aviation authorities also explored methods for deploying emergency beacons that would activate automatically if a plane went off course or lost contact. Yet these reforms came slowly, tangled in costs, politics, and bureaucracy. Some airlines upgraded tracking voluntarily, but global standards took years to develop. For families of MH370 victims, the delay felt like another betrayal, proof that the lessons of their tragedy were not being acted upon swiftly enough. How could governments allow such vulnerability to remain after such a devastating loss? Beyond technology, the disappearance also highlighted the fragility of international cooperation. The search exposed tensions between nations, with accusations of withheld radar data, conflicting timelines, and poor coordination. Families watched as countries bickered over responsibility, while their loved ones remained missing. This breakdown of trust deepened the sense of injustice, raising questions not only about aviation safety, but about the reliability of the very systems meant to protect us in times of crisis. MH370's absence forced the world to admit that progress does not guarantee certainty. Even with satellites circling above and advanced technology in every cockpit, mysteries can still emerge that defy our safeguards. The reforms inspired by this tragedy may make the skies safer, but for many, the improvements came too late. They were lessons written not in policy, but in grief, silence, and disappearance. Long after the official search ended, MH370 continued to haunt the public imagination. Documentaries, films, and books tried to unravel the enigma, each offering interpretations, each reigniting debate. News networks replayed the timeline again and again, filling gaps with speculation. The case became a cultural mirror, reflecting our fears of uncertainty and our hunger for answers in a world that promises constant clarity. Conspiracy theories flourished in the silence left by officials. Some believed the aircraft had been secretly diverted to a hidden base. Others claimed it was shot down by accident and covered up to prevent political fallout. Stranger theories suggested abduction, sabotage, or even scenarios beyond science. While experts dismissed most of these as fantasy, their persistence revealed a deeper truth. When evidence is scarce, imagination takes over, and myth fills the void left by reality. The fascination was not only about the disappearance itself, but about what it symbolized. MH370 became a story about control lost in a world obsessed with control. It showed that even the most advanced systems, governments, and technologies could fail to provide certainty. People around the world projected their anxieties onto the case, turning it into a modern legend. Online communities dissected every shred of evidence, analyzing satellite data, ocean drift models, and leaked reports. Families of the victims were often caught in this storm, their grief exploited by endless speculation. Yet many of them also joined the fight for answers, keeping the story alive when authorities were ready to let it fade. Their voices refused to be silenced, demanding that the world not look away from a mystery that remained unsolved. What makes MH370 extraordinary is that it lingers not as a closed chapter, but as an unfinished book. Its absence continues to echo, a reminder that the unknown still exists, even in an age where we believe everything can be tracked, recorded, and explained. That haunting uncertainty is why the world cannot let go, why the story refuses to sink into history, and why the disappearance remains etched into global memory as aviation's most haunting mystery. The disappearance of flight MH370 stands as one of the most unsettling events in modern history. In an age of constant connectivity, satellites circling above, and advanced aviation systems designed to prevent tragedy, a massive aircraft with 239 people on board still managed to vanish into silence. Years have passed. Fragments have surfaced. Searches have been launched and abandoned, yet the truth remains hidden beneath waves and shadows. Perhaps one day, the ocean will surrender the wreckage, revealing the final chapter of this haunting story. Perhaps technology will advance enough to search the depths where MH370 may rest. But until that day comes, the mystery is more than just an unsolved case. It is a reminder of how fragile certainty truly is. It tells us that even in a world mapped by satellites and ruled by data, there are still places where the unknown waits, untouched and undefeated. For the families, the pain is endless. They are forced to live with memories and questions instead of closure, with fragments instead of truth. For investigators, the case is an open wound in aviation history, a riddle that refuses to yield answers. And for the rest of us, MH370 is a story that challenges our faith in technology and reminds us that the skies, no matter how advanced, still hold secrets beyond our reach. And now I turn the question to you. Do you believe the mystery of MH370 will ever be solved, or is it destined to remain hidden forever in the depths of the ocean? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice adds another layer to this story of silence. If you found this journey through the shadows compelling, make sure to like this video, subscribe to Black Thread Mysteries, and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next chapter of the world's most haunting unsolved mysteries. Together, we will keep searching, because sometimes the only way to face the unknown is to walk into it.